I walked into the reception hall with my dress clinging to me like a second skin, my heels striking the polished floor with a rhythm no one seemed to notice. Laughter roared around me, glasses clinked, music pulsed. A celebration. A wedding. Her wedding, and there she was, my sister. Dressed in white satin, bathed in golden light, standing beneath a crystal chandelier like a saint carved from privilege. The crowd adored her. They always had, but my eyes weren't on her. They were on the stage behind her. On the piano that wasn't mine anymore. I stopped breathing. Because that piano, it had been my dream. My future. My escape. I had worked double shifts, skipped meals, saved every dollar, every coin, just to buy it. I had poured myself into those keys, believing they would carry me further than this suffocating town ever could, and yet, there it stood. Polished. Decorated. Claimed as hers. My throat burned. I don't remember sitting down. I don't remember the champagne that was shoved into my hand. All I remember is the weight of betrayal pressing against my chest like a knife. My name is Emily Carter. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me, because I need to ask you something. Have you ever been treated like a stranger in your own family? I had been gone 6 months. Just 6. Studying, hustling, scraping my way through music classes I could barely afford. I left my savings in my parents' hands, trusting them to guard it, to keep what I had bled for safe. Instead, they sold it. Every piece. Every note of my dream, and tonight, it was funding her fairy tale. The bride's bouquet glittered with pearls. Her earrings caught the light like fire. The band played beneath strings of flowers that dripped from the ceiling like waterfalls. I could smell roses, sugar, and lies, but all I saw was theft. My father caught my stare. He smiled. He actually smiled, as if I should be proud, as if I should thank him for giving away my future. His hand rested on her shoulder like she was some fragile jewel, while my presence was reduced to nothing more than a shadow. I felt my jaw tighten. You know that moment when rage and grief tangle so tightly inside you that you can't tell which one you're choking on? That's what filled me. They had taken everything, but I had one thing left. In my purse, folded with precision, was the truth. A loan agreement. The one they had forged in my name. The one that revealed every cent of my savings had been drained for her. For flowers. For photographers. For food and drink I was expected to swallow without choking. They thought I'd never see it. They thought I'd stay silent. They thought wrong, because tonight, I wasn't here as a sister. I wasn't here as a daughter. I was here as something sharper. The music swelled. The groom kissed her hand. Guests clapped and cheered, and I rose like a blade pulled from its sheath. My hands trembled, but my spine was straight. I walked through the tables, through the applause, through the tide of faces that didn't know the war they were about to witness. The air shifted. My heels echoed. Her smile faltered. My father's hand froze mid-clap. My mother's face drained of color. I reached the stage. I didn't bow. I didn't smile. I only spoke, and every sound in the room died. My voice cut through the air sharper than the violin strings still trembling behind me. Congratulations, I said, holding their gaze, my words dripping with a sweetness that was more venom than honey. It must feel incredible, celebrating a wedding built on someone else's savings. The silence that followed wasn't silence at all. It was the sound of 100 hearts skipping, 100 throats tightening, 100 minds scrambling to make sense of what I had just said. My sister, Hannah, blinked at me. Her lips parted as though to protest, but no words came. She looked radiant, and yet, in that instant, her glow cracked like porcelain under heat. Emily, my father hissed, low enough for only me to hear, his smile still plastered across his face for the guests. Sit down. Now. But I didn't sit. I didn't move. I let the silence feed me. I turned, slowly, deliberately, and faced the crowd. Rows of faces leaned forward, hungry for spectacle, the kind you can't look away from even though you know it's about to ruin someone. My name is Emily Carter, I told them, my voice steady, and 6 months ago I left for school. I left my parents with everything I had, savings I worked years for, because I believed I could trust them. I believed family meant safety. I let my hand slide into my purse. The papers were cool against my fingers, thin but heavy with betrayal. What I didn't know, I continued, was that every penny would be sold off, drained, dressed in silk and lace so that my sister could stand here today, pretending her happiness wasn't paid for with someone else's blood. Gasps rippled. Chairs creaked. The groom's smile faltered. Hannah's eyes went wide, wet with tears that weren't sorrow, they were rage, the kind born from exposure. Emily. Stop this, she snapped, her voice high, desperate. This is my wedding. Exactly, I whispered, unfolding the loan agreement and holding it high, letting the bold letters, the forged signature, scream louder than I ever could. And every rose, every string of pearls, every note of music you hear right now, was bought with my future. The crowd erupted. A low tide of whispers, shocked murmurs, a few disgusted scoffs. Is this true? Someone shouted from the back. All eyes snapped to my parents. My mother's hand shook against her wine glass. My father's jaw flexed, his mask of control slipping like paint in the rain. He tried to smile, to laugh, to brush it off. She's confused, she's bitter, she doesn't understand. But then I read the line aloud. Word for word. The forged date. The forged signature. The total. $48,000. My name tied to a loan I had never taken. Every syllable was a bullet, and the crowd, once drunk on champagne and music, sobered in an instant. My sister reached for me, panic etched across her flawless face. You're ruining everything. She spat. Why couldn't you just stay gone? Why couldn't you let me have this day? I looked at her then. Really looked. The dress, the diamonds, the trembling hands clutching at nothing, and for the first time, I didn't see a bride. I saw a thief. I leaned closer, my words barely above a whisper but sharp enough to slice through her composure. You didn't just steal from me, Hannah. You stole the years I starved, the nights I bled through work, the dream I was building. One note at a time. And for what? So you could play queen for a day? She flinched as if the chandelier's light itself had burned her. The crowd's whispers grew louder. Some guests pushed back their chairs, disgust painting their faces. Others clung to their drinks, watching like vultures circling fresh kill. The groom, poor fool, stared at Hannah like she'd just grown horns. Is this true? His voice cracked. Tell me this isn't true. But Hannah couldn't answer. Not without drowning in her own lies. My father finally broke, his voice booming through the hall. Enough. His fist slammed against the table. The crystal shook, wine spilling like blood across white linen. This is not the time, Emily. This is not the place. I turned to him, my rage honed into something cold, surgical. You had every chance to make it right. Every phone call, every letter I sent, begging you to explain why my money was gone. You ignored me. You laughed at me. You told me I was imagining things. And now? I held up the papers, high above my head. Now you get to explain it to everyone. The room was no longer a celebration. It was a courtroom, and I was the only one holding evidence. Hannah's makeup streaked with tears. My mother crumbled into her chair. My father's face burned crimson, and me, I stood taller than I ever had before, because for the first time, they weren't the ones holding the story. I was, and I wasn't finished, not even close. The ballroom smelled of roses and smoke. Not real smoke, just the kind that rises when a family burns itself alive in front of everyone. I stood on that stage with the loan agreement in my hands, and I could feel their eyes on me. Friends. Neighbors, co-workers, people who had always smiled politely, whispered about our family's perfection, envied my sister's polished glow. Now they were watching the cracks split wide open. Hannah's groom, Daniel, still hadn't moved. His face was pale, his fingers twitching against his cufflinks. He looked at her like a stranger. Answer me, he said again, his voice cutting the air. Is it true? Did you use her money? Hannah shook her head too quickly. No. She's lying, she's jealous, she's always been jealous of me. My laugh slipped out before I could stop it. Bitter. Low. Jealous? You're standing in my stolen dress, under my stolen chandelier, married with money you never worked for, and I'm the jealous one. The crowd murmured. The walls seemed to close in, heavy with tension. I turned to Daniel, locking eyes with him. Do you know where your ring came from? Do you know where this reception was paid from? Every champagne glass, every lily on these tables, it wasn't love money. It was mine. He looked down at his hand, at the band of gold gleaming there, and I saw the way his chest caved in. Doubt was poison, and I had just poured it straight down his throat. My father tried to step forward, tried to block me, but I shifted, lifting the papers higher. Don't you dare. You signed your own daughter's name on this loan. You dragged me into debt while she played princess. And you thought no one would ever know. Emily, my mother's voice cracked, thin and sharp. Please, stop. You're embarrassing us. Embarrassing? I snapped. You embarrassed yourselves the moment you chose her over me. The moment you decided my blood was worth less than her spotlight. The words left me trembling, but I didn't falter. I let the silence swallow them whole. Somewhere near the back, a woman whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, monsters. They did this to their own child? The whispers multiplied. Like knives, they cut through the illusion my parents had spent years building. Hannah reached for Daniel's hand, desperate, frantic. Baby, don't listen to her. She's twisting things, she's always been dramatic. But Daniel pulled away. His chair screeched as he stood. You let me stand here, in front of everyone, promising a future, on lies? On her sacrifice? Tears streaked Hannah's mascara. Her perfect image dissolved with every breath. And me? I was done playing victim. I stepped forward, closer to the mic the band had abandoned, and my voice poured through the speakers. For years, I told myself love meant sacrifice. That if I just worked harder, saved more, kept quiet, I would finally earn their approval. I was wrong. Because some people don't want your success. They want your silence. They want to use you until you have nothing left. Gasps filled the hall. A few claps even echoed, sharp and hesitant, like sparks on dry grass. I looked at Hannah, her white dress trembling like a flag of surrender. You took everything from me. My piano, my savings, my trust. But do you know what I still have? Her eyes darted, wild, searching, my voice. And I let it rise. I'm not your shadow anymore. I'm not the forgotten daughter, the backup plan, the stranger in my own home. I am the storm you never saw coming. And tonight, every single person here will remember that. The crowd roared, not applause, but gasps, whispers, outrage. The hall was no longer hers. It was mine. Hannah broke. She lunged for me, her bouquet crashing to the ground, petals scattering like shattered glass. Her nails grazed my arm, but Daniel caught her, his grip like iron. Enough, he said, his voice heavy with betrayal. He looked at her with eyes colder than stone. We're done here. Her scream tore through the music still humming faintly in the background. No. You can't leave me. Not after all this. But he was already walking away, the crowd parted for him like water, whispers trailing him like smoke, and in that moment, under the chandelier, papers trembling in my hands, family shattered at my feet, I realized something. This wasn't just revenge. This was rebirth, and I wasn't finished, not until every mask had fallen, not until every debt had been repaid, not until they knew what it felt like to lose everything. When Daniel stormed out of the ballroom, the reception cracked open like glass. Under a hammer. Guests rose from their seats, some rushing to the exits, others staying rooted in morbid fascination. The orchestra faltered, the violins falling silent mid-note. The air buzzed with whispers that would stain my family forever, but I wasn't finished. Not yet. I lowered the papers, folded them slowly, slid them back into my purse. Calm movements, deliberate. That's what terrified them most, that I wasn't screaming, wasn't hysterical. I was composed. Controlled. A scalpel, not a sledgehammer. My father's voice broke the tension. Emily, you've made your point, he said, sweat shining on his forehead. This spectacle has gone far enough. Sit down before you regret it. Regret? I almost laughed. I turned to him, meeting his glare with fire. You think I regret standing here? After you carved my name into debt like a butcher marking his cattle? After you auctioned off my dreams to buy her throne? No, Dad. The only regret in this room belongs to you. The crowd hissed, a chorus of disgust. Some guests rose to leave, muttering about fraud, about betrayal. Others stared, wide-eyed, as if they were watching a sacred family collapse into rubble. My mother reached out, trembling. Emily, please, we can explain. Explain? I cut her off. You had 6 months to explain. 6 months of phone calls, voicemails, letters you ignored. And now, you'll explain to them. I gestured to the crowd, their judgment heavy, unforgiving. Hannah sobbed into her ruined bouquet, mascara streaking her cheeks like war paint. You've ruined me, she whispered, eyes wild, feral. Do you know what people will say? Do you know what this will do to me? Good, I said softly. Now you know how it feels. The guests were no longer clapping, no longer drinking. They were recording. I saw the glow of phones raised, cameras catching every angle, every word. This wasn't just a wedding anymore, it was evidence. I leaned into the mic again, my voice steady. Everyone here deserves to know the truth. My name has been tied to a $48,000 loan I never agreed to. My parents signed it, drained my savings, and sold off everything I worked for, so that this wedding could exist. So if you enjoyed the wine, the food, the flowers, remember, it wasn't paid for by love. It was bought with theft. The hall erupted. Gasps, outrage, the sound of chairs scraping against marble. Some guests left in disgust, others stayed rooted, desperate not to miss the downfall of the so-called perfect Carters. My father lunged for the mic, but I stepped back, slipping it out of his reach. His hand closed on air, his face dark with fury, and that's when I said it, this isn't the end. This is the beginning. Because tomorrow morning, this loan agreement goes straight to the bank. And then to the police. The silence that followed was suffocating. My father froze. My mother crumbled. Hannah screamed, a sound too raw to belong to a bride, but I didn't stop. I'll make sure every creditor knows whose hands really signed this. I'll make sure the world knows the truth you tried to bury under lace and champagne. You thought I'd stay silent. You thought wrong. Gasps turned to cheers. Yes, cheers. Some guests clapped, some even shouted encouragement. Strangers, siding with me. My voice. My story, and in that moment, something shifted inside me. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't the shadow behind Hannah's glowed eye. Was the fire. I left the stage without waiting for their response, heels striking against marble like a war drum. Guests stepped aside, parting from me as if I were royalty. Their eyes followed me, not her. Their whispers carried my name, not hers. By the time I reached the door, the wedding was ashes. The marriage was dead before it began. And my family, they were ghosts, sitting in their own ruin. I stepped into the night, the cool air biting my skin. My chest heaved, my hands still trembling, but my spirit was steel, because this was no longer about money. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming every piece of me they had tried to erase, and I was just getting started. The night air cut sharp against my skin as I stepped out of the reception hall. My heels clicked across the pavement, every step echoing like punctuation. At the end of a sentence I had been writing my whole life. Behind me, chaos brewed. Voices rose, furniture scraped, the once perfect Carter wedding unraveling in real time. But I didn't turn back. I didn't need to. They were finished. At least in that room, but I wasn't naive. I knew a single public exposure wasn't enough. My family had always been skilled at burying dirt. They'd polish lies until they gleamed like truth. If I wanted justice, I couldn't just wound them. I had to dismantle them piece by piece. The next morning, I walked into the bank. My hands didn't shake this time when I slid the loan agreement across the desk. The manager, a stiff man in a navy suit, adjusted his glasses, scanning the forged signature, the mismatched dates. "You're saying this isn't yours?" he asked. "I'm saying my father signed my name without my consent. I was out of state the entire time. Check the dates. Cross-reference my school records. You'll see." His frown deepened. He disappeared into the back with the papers. When he returned, his expression was colder, sharper. "This is fraud," he said quietly. "Serious fraud." The word tasted sweet. Within hours, I was sitting across from an investigator. Questions came fast, clipped. Where was I during the loan application? Did I have proof? Could I provide travel records, bank statements, class schedules? Yes, I said. Yes. Yes. Every answer was a nail in their coffin. That afternoon, I filed a police report. By evening, a case number was stapled to my name. For the first time, my parents couldn't hide behind their reputation, their charm, their lies. There was a paper trail now. One they couldn't burn. And the internet? The internet had already lit its own fire. By the time I got back to my apartment, the videos from the wedding had gone viral. Clips of me standing on the stage, loan agreement in hand, voice shaking but strong. Millions of views. Comments pouring in. "This is the definition of betrayal. Her sister deserves to lose everything. Emily, if you see this, never stop fighting." I didn't post them. I didn't share them. I didn't have to. Strangers carried my story for me, passing it like a torch through the dark. And my family? They couldn't silence it. Not this time. The next call I got was from Hannah. Her voice was ragged, raw. "You ruined my life," she spat. "Daniel left me. The wedding's all over social media. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Finally, I said, my tone flat. "You get to taste what you fed me. You think people will side with you forever? They won't. They'll forget you. But me? I'll come back from this. I always do." "No," I whispered. "Not this time. Because this time, I have proof." I hung up before she could respond. The next day, my mother called. Tears laced her voice. "Emily, please. You don't understand what this will do to our family. The shame, the humiliation, we'll lose everything." "Good," I said. "Now you know how it feels." And when my father finally called, he didn't beg. He threatened. "You're making a mistake," he growled. "We are your blood. You'll regret this when the world turns its back on you." But I only smiled. Even though he couldn't see it, the world already turned its back on me. You taught it how. Click. Every call, every plea, every threat only fueled me more. Because I wasn't just their daughter anymore. I was their reckoning. Days passed. The bank launched its investigation. The police began their inquiries. Hannah's face, once plastered across bridal magazines, was now stamped under headlines: "Bride's wedding funded by fraud." My parents' business partners pulled out. Neighbors stopped waving. Invitations disappeared, and through it all, I stood still. No longer invisible. No longer silent. I watched as everything they had stolen, everything they had built on my back, crumbled, and for the first time in my life, I felt free. But freedom wasn't enough, not yet, because true justice? That required patience. Precision. And I was willing to wait until every last mask fell. The investigation moved faster than I expected. Fraud leaves fingerprints, and my parents' hands were all over the crime. 2 weeks after the wedding, I sat in a cramped office across from the bank investigator. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The air smelled of ink and paper. "Emily," he said, folding his hands, "we've confirmed the loan signatures were forged." Surveillance footage shows your father entering the branch on the date of the application. Witnesses corroborated it. There's no question, you were not involved. Relief washed over me like cool water, but it wasn't joy. It was vindication. What happens now? I asked. The account is being frozen. The debt is no longer your responsibility. Legal proceedings are underway. Your parents will likely face charges of fraud and identity theft. Fraud. Identity theft. Words I once thought belonged to strangers in news stories, not to my own family, but that's who they were now, strangers. When I walked out of that building, the autumn air felt sharper, cleaner. The chains I'd been dragging for months were gone. But in their place was fire, because their punishment had only begun. The fallout spread like wildfire. My father's construction business, once a pillar in town, collapsed under the weight of bad press. Clients pulled out. Contracts dissolved. Rumors spread. If he forged his own daughter's signature, what else would he do? My mother, once the darling of every charity gala, became a pariah. Photos of her smiling beside my sister at the wedding, champagne in hand, circulated with captions that cut like knives. The woman who stole her daughter's future. Invitations dried up. Doors closed, and Hannah, she tried to salvage her image. Instagram posts of self-care, captions about resilience. Hollow smiles against rented backdrops. But the comments told the truth. Where's your sister's piano? Did you pay for that with fraud too? Thief in white. She deleted post after post, but the internet never forgets. One evening, she showed up at my apartment. Her knock was frantic, her voice trembling through the door. Emily, please, I'm sorry. I didn't know Dad forged your name. I wanted one perfect day. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I opened the door just enough to see her face. The flawless mask was gone. She was gaunt, mascara smudged, hair unkempt. You didn't know? I asked quietly. Or you didn't care? Her eyes flickered, betraying her. You stood under that chandelier, I continued, wearing jewels bought with my blood. You smiled while I starved. You knew. Her lips trembled. We're sisters. Doesn't that mean anything to you? It used to, I said, my voice cold. But sisters don't steal each other's lives. I shut the door before she could answer. Her sobs echoed down the hallway as she left. Weeks passed. My family avoided me, but their names couldn't escape. The headlines. Carter family fraud scandal. Wedding of lies. The story wasn't just local anymore, it had spread, picked up by national outlets hungry for scandal, and with every article, every broadcast, their empire shrank. Then came the court date. I sat in the gallery, hands clasped, watching as my parents stood before the judge. Their clothes were pressed, their faces pale. My father's jaw was tight, my mother's eyes red. Hannah sat behind them, silent, a ghost of the bride she once pretended to be. The prosecutor laid it out plainly: forged documents, fraudulent loan, misappropriated funds. Evidence stacked like bricks, each one heavier than the last. My name was spoken again and again. Not as their daughter. As their victim. When the verdict was read, guilty, I felt nothing at first. No joy, no triumph. Just stillness. Then, slowly, the weight lifted. They had stolen my future. And now, I had stolen theirs. After court, reporters swarmed me. Cameras flashed, microphones shoved into my face. Emily, how does it feel to see justice served? What do you want people to know? I paused, then spoke the truth. Family is supposed to protect you. Mine destroyed me. But I fought back. And I want everyone who's ever been silenced, betrayed, or erased to know, you don't have to stay quiet. You have a voice. Use it. The clip aired everywhere. Strangers messaged me, thanking me, sharing their own stories of betrayal. My pain had become a mirror for theirs, and for the first time, I realized, revenge wasn't just about tearing them down. It was about building myself up. But I wasn't done yet. There was one final step. One last truth they hadn't faced, and I would be the one to deliver it. The courthouse emptied like a drained riverbed, leaving behind scraps of voices, footsteps, echoes. My parents shuffled out, flanked by their lawyer, their faces pale and hollow, but I wasn't ready to leave. Not yet, because the verdict wasn't the end. Not for me. Not for them. I followed them into the parking lot. The air was brittle, the kind of late autumn chill that cuts straight through bone. Hannah was there, clutching her mother's arm, her heels wobbling on cracked pavement. My father's shoulders sagged, his arrogance stripped down to nothing more than a desperate old man. Emily. My mother's voice cracked when she saw me. Please, haven't you done enough? Enough? The word made me laugh, low and bitter. Enough? You stole my savings, forged my name, drowned me in debt, and smiled while you did it. And now that the world knows what you are, suddenly I'm the problem? My father snapped, his voice sharp even through exhaustion. We are still your parents. You will regret this. I stepped closer, my boots crunching against gravel. You're not my parents. Parents protect. Parents sacrifice. You only took. Hannah's voice broke in, shrill and trembling. Why? Are you doing this? You've already ruined us. Daniel's gone, the house is under investigation, the whole town hates us, what more do you want? I looked at her, at the smeared mascara, the dress she no longer fit into, the crown of entitlement. Knocked clean off her head, what do I want? I said softly. I want you to feel what I felt when I came home and saw my future erased. I want you to live with the memory of me standing at your perfect wedding, tearing it all down, because that's exactly what you did to me. You stole my dreams, Hannah. Now you get to live without yours. Her face crumpled. She clung to my mother's sleeve, sobbing. I didn't flinch. You told me once, I continued, that I'd never matter. That I'd always be the shadow to your light. Well, here we are. Everyone sees you now. Not as a bride. Not as a princess. As a fraud. My father tried to step forward, but his lawyer pulled him back, whispering about consequences, probation, sentencing. His fury burned in silence. I met his glare one last time. You wanted me erased. Instead, I erased you. For a moment, the only sound was the wind. Leaves scraped across the asphalt like ash from a dying fire, then I turned and walked away. In the weeks that followed, the fallout only deepened. Their house, sold to cover legal fees. Their friends, gone, vanished like smoke. Their names, spat out in whispers, no longer respected, only pitied or scorned. Hannah moved back in with them, the queen with no kingdom. Her social media was a wasteland, every new post flooded with reminders of what she'd done. No brand would touch her, no man would date her, no circle would welcome her. My parents lived under probation, forced to surrender control of everything they once lorded over others, and me, I rebuilt. I bought back a piano. Not the same one they'd sold that years ago, but a new one. Sleek. Black. The keys cool beneath my fingers. Each note I played was freedom, a hymn to survival. I worked late nights, saved, and applied for grants. My professors rallied behind me when the story broke. Doors that had been shut opened. My voice carried further than I ever dreamed, but there was still one last piece missing. Closure. So one evening, I wrote a letter. No venom. No screaming. Just truth. You took everything from me. My money, my trust, my name. But you couldn't take my voice. And now the world knows what you are. I don't forgive you. I don't hate you either. I'm free from you. That's enough. I sealed it, addressed it to their broken house, and mailed it without looking back. For the first time in my life, silence felt like peace, but I knew the final strike was still to come, because poetic justice doesn't end in court. It ends when the people who erased you are forced to stand in your light, forever, and soon, they would. I used to dream of this moment, standing on a stage, lights warm on my skin, a piano at my fingertips. Not to expose, not to burn, but to play. To create something beautiful. And now, that dream was here. For months after the trial, I was invited to perform at a winter showcase hosted by my music department. Students, professors, donors, all gathered in a grand hall, their faces open, expectant. This time, the room was mine by invitation, not by intrusion. I smoothed my dress, sat at the piano, and let my hands hover above the keys. For a second, I thought of Hannah. Of the wedding dress stained with mascara, of the bouquet crushed under her own desperation. I thought of my parents, their empire in ruins, their names synonymous with fraud, and then I pressed down, letting the first note ring. Music spilled out, not from rage, not from grief, but from survival. From freedom. Every note was proof, they hadn't broken me. They had sharpened me, but poetic justice isn't complete without witnesses. 2 weeks after the showcase, a letter arrived at my apartment. Handwritten. Shaky pen strokes I recognized instantly, my mother's. Emily, please. We've lost everything. Your father's health is failing. Hannah can't leave the house without being harassed. We have nothing left. Isn't that enough for you? Can't we start over? Can't you forgive? I read it once. Twice. Then said it. Aside, forgiveness wasn't the point, truth was. So I planned something they couldn't escape. The town's annual charity gala had always been my mother's kingdom. A glittering night of gowns, speeches, and staged generosity. This year, attendance was smaller, colder. The Carter name had poisoned it. But I attended, this time as a guest performer. When I walked in, heads turned. Not out of pity, not out of scandal, but out of respect. I spotted them near the back. My parents. Hannah. Shriveled versions of their former selves. My mother's dress was plain, my father's suit ill-fitted, Hannah's face pale beneath heavy makeup. They shrank. When they saw me, good, when it was my turn to play, I didn't go straight to the piano. I walked to the microphone. Good evening, I began, voice steady. Some of you know me. Some of you know my family. You may have heard pieces of our story, half-truths, rumors, headlines. Tonight, you'll hear it from me. A ripple spread across the room. I let my gaze land on them, my parents, Hannah. Before turning back to the crowd, my savings were stolen. My name was forged. My future was sold so that someone else could have one perfect day. And for years, I was told to stay silent, to accept being invisible, to be the shadow while someone else lived in my light. The audience leaned in, breathless, but shadows don't disappear. They grow. They learn. They rise. I let the words hang, heavy, then crossed to the piano. This piece, I said, settling onto the bench, is called Inheritance. But it's not about money. It's about strength, the kind you inherit when pain tries to erase you. Then I played, the hall filled with sound. Low, aching notes rising into sharp crescendos, each chord pulling from a place I'd buried deep. It wasn't just music. It was confession, rage, grief, release. When the final note rang out, the room erupted into applause. People rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, calling my name, and my family. They sat frozen. Faces pale, hands still. The applause wasn't for them anymore. It never would be again. I stood, bowed once, then walked off stage without a glance in their direction, because the justice had already been served. Weeks later, the house I grew up in went up for auction. The marble floors, the crystal chandeliers, the piano room that had once been mine, gone to strangers. I didn't attend. I didn't need to. Instead, I stood in my own apartment, surrounded by walls I paid for, furniture I earned, a piano that belonged to me and me alone. I played late into the night, the city humming outside my window, not to drown out memories. Not to prove anything, but because the music was mine again. People ask me sometimes, do you miss them? Do you wish things had been different? And the truth is, yes. I wish I'd had parents who saw me, a sister who loved me, a family that valued me. I wish betrayal hadn't been the language we spoke, but wishing doesn't change reality. Reality is, they stole from me. They erased me. And I survived. Reality is, I built myself from the ashes they left. And reality is, sometimes, justice isn't about forgiveness. It's about making sure the world knows who you are, and who they are. So when people hear my story, they don't remember them, they remember me, the girl who lost everything. The woman who took it back.